Been working with Dave for about 2.5 years now, doing all types of different pen tests.
Can't hear you really good.
No? Can you turn me up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Been working with Dave for about 2.5 years now. A lot of experience in network administration is my background, so I love doing internal pen tests. But that's me.
It's funny, Larry, when you come to Trusted Sec, it's kind of an interesting place because you get thrown into a lot of different situations. And of course, you know, I said, hey, Larry, just so you know, we're going to be speaking at Bsides Cleveland. And he's like, well, what's the topic? I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure it out later. And literally, we went over the presentation yesterday. And Larry's like, here's all my slide decks and everything. I'm like, I haven't even done mine yet, so I'll figure that out before we start. I'll just throw a bunch of cool code and stuff like that. Everything will be fine, right? But what's funny about, you know, working with that is we went into a lot of different situations. And Larry, you know, when he first started, it was one of those ones where, you know, he'd go into an unknown situation and be like really nervous. And so I'd throw him into like the most horrendous situations you could possibly imagine. Like, hey, you need to figure out how to like reverse engineer a PLC. I've never touched a PLC. I know, that's why I'm having you go and do it. And you know, he did awesome. So, you know, I love you, Larry. So this talk, when we came out with it, is if you look at kind of where we're at as an industry, I mean, a lot of people have a good conceptual view of where we're supposed to be at as an industry, where we're supposed to head to. But if you look at specifically like the pen testing field, for me it's kind of such a disjointed group of motley crews where we're doing a lot of different things that don't necessarily benefit what we're actually trying to go as far as an end goal. And if you look at where we're kind of at right now, there's no real good definition other than maybe P-test, the execution standard, or a few others around what a pen test is or what our goal should be to try to accomplish it. And really, you know, pen testing is funny because it kind of got birthed out of a necessity of, hey, you know, you should have hackers simulate what hackers do. And then it became more of a standard of like, hey, we just need to get a pen test done for PCI, or hey, we need to get a pen test done because it's going to help our security program. And really, you know, if you look at that and the exposures that we're identifying with it, we don't really see a whole lot of big value coming from them because people aren't actually focusing on what attackers are doing. What I love seeing is in the news, right? You see a lot of the sophisticated attacks that happen on the news, right? Every time that a company gets breached now, it's done by a sophisticated attacker that originated from China or North Korea, whatever the DICE is saying at the given time. And literally, if you look at the types of breaches that we're experiencing, it's because the companies themselves that got breached neglected security for years and years and years. It has nothing to do with a sophisticated attacker that was targeting them. I mean, the types of attacks we see are very simplistic in nature. And so if you look at that, you know, you have a lot of things happening now where companies can just blame, you know, hey, we got hacked by China, and all of a sudden now that's a good cause for them to actually go and be fine as far as the media is concerned. It's no longer their fault for not spending money on security. It's their fault because they got hacked by China and everything's okay. And so I look at that and I look at the pen testing industry and I say, okay, well, what do we need to do to get better to actually go through it? And so if you look at a lot of the different types of testing that we do today, traditionally pen testing has been going right after DA or getting root on boxes or things like that to show that we can have access to that data, right? And so you go in, that's a bad Google search, by the way, I've done that before. Fucking sucks. Whew. Bad Google searches. But you know, as testers, you know, our goal has always been like, hey, we got domain admin, which means that we had access to all of your intellectual property, which means we had access to all of your data, which isn't necessarily true. And so if you look at where we need to evolve at as an industry, it's a lot different than what we're doing today. We have to focus more on personalized data around a company that makes them unique, that makes them sensitive. Go after that and start targeting. Larry, I mean, when you go after a pen test, what do you traditionally go after as a person?
Domain admin.
Domain admin. That's not helping me out at all.
Secret
Next slide.
sauce. Whatever makes the company the money. PCI data, PHI data, their secret ingredients, that type of thing.
For us, you know, like if you look at the retail space, obviously credit cards are easy, right? You look at medical field, ePHI is always a good one. But look at things like medical research or impacting patient life or going after, you know, next generation product lines. Those are all things that attackers are going after and things that make an organization unique that we need to be targeting as attackers to really focus forward. And you know, it's one of those interesting ones where, you know, the media doesn't really do justice on what the attackers are actually going after. You look at the latest one with OPM, right? The Office of Personnel Management, right? They had you know, 4 million, if not larger, of Social Security numbers taken. You know, when going after clearance data, things like that. That's a big deal because they can start going after people that have clearances, going after people that have specific types of data. I'm impacted by that, unfortunately. And the problem is that the media itself is a big problem to blame. Just as an example, like For you that don't know, I'm on the media quite a bit, and I try not to be as much anymore because I just kind of don't like doing it anymore. But one of the funny ones that I did recently was part of the OPM hack, okay? And so when you go on the media and you're on camera or whatever, you're on Fox or CNN or CNBC, I don't know if you know this or not, but you actually send them talking points, right? And you tell them what you're going to be talking about so that they can kind of frame the conversation around that. It's a good, working relationship between between the media. So recently, about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I'm sitting down, on a big news organization. I'm not going to say which one, but I'm sitting down and I'm right in front of this screen, and I'm comfortable on TV. I have no problem talking in front of TV and everything, and I'm perfectly relaxed. I'm joking, everything's going great. And they're like, "Okay, Dave, you're going to be on in 3 minutes." I'm like, "Cool." And I'm supposed to be talking about the OPM hack, right? How it impacted, military folks, and how could something like this happen or whatever. Anyways. So I get on, and they introduce me as an Iranian nuclear expert. This is not a bullshit story. This is 100% legit. It's like, we're going to introduce David Kennedy. He's an Iranian nuclear expert. So Dave, what I want to ask you is that, with the Iran situation and the tension in the Middle East, what is Iran doing to step up their military again? I have no fucking idea about anything about nuclear-related anything at all. So if you look at, and I'm not going to, the clip luckily was only up for like 2 days, and I'm the only one that has a copy of it because it was terrible. But you at this point in time, when you get fluxed into that type of situation, you have really 2 or 3 choices you have available. One is, say, hey, no fucking idea what's going on in Iran, but I can talk to you about cyber because cyber's hot, right? Or you bullshit the whole thing and you look like an idiot, okay? Or 3, you try to steer the topic and give a little bit of information that you might know about and steer it more towards cyber. So I'm like, okay. Yeah, the stuff in Iran, I'm sitting there and my tone completely changed. If you look at body behavior, I'm sweating, I got like a look of utter disgust, like I'm gonna be sick and throwing up on TV, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm fumbling, I'm like, yeah, Iran, it's terrible what's happening over there. But what's even more crazy is all these other Middle Eastern countries are going into the cyber stuff. And she's like, yeah, the cyber stuff's interesting, but go back to that Iran thing real quick. I'm like, shit. I'm like, no idea what to do here. I'm like, all right, so, and I was trying to take another stab at yeah, that's scary stuff with the Iran stuff, but if you look at the cyber stuff, it's even scarier, right? I mean, she's like, okay, Dave K, thanks for coming on, appreciate it, and then that was it, right? I'm like, terrible time. So, the media is all kinds of messed up with what they're talking about, as far as what's important and what's not, but it's always interesting to see that. If you look at evolving pen tests, for me, pen testing isn't about going after DA anymore. And granted, I used to love doing that because I used to just go up there and be like, hey, I just got everything, I owned everything, got access to everything, and all of a sudden now everything's perfect. And it's really changed to that. We have to go more towards objective testing, which is really looking at, what makes a company unique and sensitive and what type of controls they have in place that we can circumvent and the types of things that they need to do to defend against it. For me, I'd rather know, hey, all my shit's over here, and in order to get to that, I had to do this, and how do I figure out how to defend against that and multiple other ways of getting into those types of areas than the entire effing company. A company moves too fast for us to secure everything. It's not possible to secure everything within an organization. However, if I can start to secure things that make a difference, whether or not a company is still alive or not, those are the things that I'd rather go after and protect. Granted, yes, I could go on the media that I experienced a breach, but for Anthem, for example, all the millions of social security numbers that were out there, I mean, if they didn't have those in an unencrypted database and extracting all those in an unencrypted database, would they really even be on the news if they were breached or not? No. And Anthem, I mean, their business is what? Personal information, right? That's what they should be protecting against. Retail, it's credit cards. Who gives a fuck about anything else other than retail credit cards? Who cares about anything else other than credit cards? That's what makes them unique. Is someone going to care that someone hacked their clothing line? They get made in China and Bangladesh in the process of that? No one gives a shit about that in the media. All they care about is whether or not my credit card was compromised and whether or not that impacts me. Medical research. No one cares that your medical research stuff got compromised except for that company. Now, that company may not be in business 5 years from now if all of your medical research is now going to somewhere in the country and they're using it against you. But at the same time, I mean, what hits people in the media, what hits people personally within organizations are mostly things that make them unique as a company. So for us, we have to really change what we're doing as far as assessors and not focusing on the entire company because most of the stuff that companies do are irrelevant. An HR role is irrelevant. A sales organization is irrelevant. And when I say irrelevant, not the roles themselves, but the types of information that they have that we want to secure. So that requires us to think outside the box. It requires us to become sophisticated hackers, right? To actually look at things. And it's funny is if you look at all the breaches that have happened right now in the recent news, has any of them really been sophisticated? The North Korea thing with Sony. That shit looked like it was code out in 1982. Like it was like 9 EXE droppers that use commercial shit that they could just download. And literally, if you can write like 5 or 10 lines of Python code, you're now a sophisticated hacker. What's that?
I said that Fishnet in their $1 million red team contract the year before missed.
You can say it louder. I'm not going to say it. Go ahead.
You own the company. You're fine. You're not going to get fired.
Well, I'm just going to repeat what Chris said. You know, that company that was hired a year before that they all missed would happen to be Fishnet. That's what Chris said, okay? So I'm just going to, whatever.
Fact. You can go look it up. It was $1 million.
Worth of security work. Yeah.
That they just, fuck it.
It's fuck it, it's all good. But it's good, because you got scanners. You got vulnerability scanners that fucking find everything. Shit's great. To be honest with you, though,
Outside the box.
I'll be honest.
Box.
If people actually fixed all the shit that was in vulnerability scanners, like you literally like stop 90% of the breaches that happen out there. It's bullshit. I mean,
yes.
Like what we do as pen testers is not sexy. It's not elite or crazy. It's so dumb. It is so dumb. But anyway, so back to this. Thanks, Chris. Love you. The sophisticated stuff that we're seeing out there is not. It's just relating it to a specific country that all of a sudden now makes it, you're a target now, all of a sudden your company's horrible security practices are great. So I'm going to give a couple of thinking outside the box type situations. Larry's going to do one, I'm going to do one, and then we'll kind of walk through some different scenarios of how we think as attackers, because it really does require us to think outside the box, even though our ways in are so stupid. Like going after people with phishing is stupid, but it works perfectly. It's not sophisticated. It just means that I have some time to spend on researching who I'm going after. Like, I don't have to be a crazy hacker that understands programming to go phish somebody. You can just use my tool to do that for you. Like, you don't need to do anything else other than using my own tool to compromise a company. Okay? So this is a manufacturing heist. So we had a red team exercise. And the whole purpose of the red team exercise was to really go after a lot of the R&D groups, because they were doing some really cool stuff around R&D that they expected their companies to increase significant sizes with their new product lines they were coming out with. So, in this case, we had to use any method that we wanted possible. And the easiest for Chris is just breaking into the fucking building and stealing everything. The easiest for me is social engineering, because I'm not as ballsy as he is. Going after it, the first thing we thought of is like, okay, well, let's research the company and figure out what these R&D products are, what was publicly out there, what we can figure out for an organization that we can actually go and target. And so we decided to do phishing first. And so what we first started doing is looking at specific people in the R&D group, like, hey, okay, we're going to start going after them first. And what we ended up doing is, instead of targeting the R&D people first and foremost, like every one in our industry seems to want to go after like the IT folks because they have elevated rights, or going after the R&D people because they haven't been trained before. Like those two are like the most smartest people in your organization as far as like technology goes. Like R&D folks are usually pretty smart because they're like building formulas and chemical equations. They're not going to fall for like your Amazon package got diverted somewhere, right? Now salespeople on the other hand are fucking great, right? You can be like, hey, you just won $1 million from this fucking African prince. And they're like, holy shit, I just won $1 million. I'm quitting here. I quit. And I'm clicking on those links before I do it. I'm going to use my own corporate asset to register for that $1 million because I'm out of here, right? So salespeople for me are the best, right? You go after sales folks, number one. And so what we did is we launched a malicious website on the customer. And what we ended up finding was that we started looking at their different websites on the outside. And we found a box that had like SQL injection on it or whatever. We didn't have direct access to compromise the underlying web application, but we had access to rewrite the web page. So we created our own web page that was their own website, right? And then we sent them some emails from their own website saying, hey, it's like, I think what we did was like a customer survey. Like, do you think you make enough money? Do you think for salespeople, like, should you be compensated more for your sales percentages for what you sell and all this other shit, right? They're like, hell yeah, I should be compensated more. So we sent it from their own. What's that? Yeah, send it from their own website against people that want more money. That's all sales is focused on is money, right? No one likes being salespeople. Like everybody hates being salespeople, but they really like is money. So if you could be like, hey, do you want more money? Like, yeah, I want more money. It's perfect, right? So we compromised their site, sent it to them, and we ended up getting a few accounts that we were able to compromise within OWA. So we got usernames and passwords, all that good stuff, and then we compromised their system, or compromised their OWA accounts from the outside. Now, what's great with compromised accounts is that compromised systems, or when you compromise user accounts, what's great with Exchange is that you already have communication paths that are viable. So you've already have an established way of trust. So for me, if I already have an established communication for trust, all I do is I sit there for like an hour, and I see different people that they've emailed, and I just find a way that I can get to the R&D people through normal email communications. And if you don't know this through OWA, there's a rules folder that you can make inside of OWA that says like anything that has a certain subject line of this, don't ever show it in your inbox and just automatically delete it. So you'll send emails out to individuals based on certain criteria of trust, and then if they respond back to it, it automatically goes to the deleted folder. No one ever checks, and then you just sit there and monitor the deleted folder. So you sit there and you send emails to individuals trying to get something out of them. And what was interesting is that when we started doing our initial reconnaissance, we're like, okay, well, Excel PowerShell injection is probably going to be our best route. However, they had a certain piece of, I'm not going to say the company name, a certain piece of virtualization technology, sandbox technology for email gateways, okay? So, when you send an email out, it takes whatever's in that email, it puts it up in a virtual machine, and it inspects what's occurring to see if there's any malicious software in there, that it makes any communications out network-wise, or makes any registry changes, or it might be malicious in some way, shape, or form, right? It may start with an F and end with an E. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know who that could be, but... Anyways, so bypassing sandbox technology is one of those things that's extremely complex, right? It requires a lot of research. It took us months and months and months of developing this in order for us to burn it on this sophisticated company, right? So we're going to be releasing this today. It's code that we spent probably years on, I think, trying to get around these types of technologies. So here's the code. So this bypasses all the virtualization sandboxing technologies. They're stupid, right? Because what they do is they virtualize a very patternistic type virtual environment. So they only spin up one core for optimization, and then from there they look at what's actually happening within inside of these virtual machines. And so if you say, okay, well if my cores are less than 1, don't run my code. So if I'm in a virtual machine that has one, does anybody's computer anymore today in anybody's environment have less than 1 core in them? No, less than 2, sorry. Less than 2? No, right? So I know I'm in a virtual machine. I know I'm in the one company that starts in F and E, ends in the E. So it might be something that you light on fire, and I like eyes. Anyways, so if you look at that, and they're very patternistic type exploitation that you can use on these. So what you do is any code that you ever release that has malware in it, like the new Dizer, whatever the hell it's called, malware, automatically checks for this specific issue. It says, okay, well, if I'm in a virtual machine of less than 2 processors, then don't run my code. And it's like, oh, hey, you're good. I mean, you're obviously not running any code, so come on through and you can infect that machine. It's all good. So, if you have 3 lines of code, you can get around pretty much of your multi-million-dollar types of investment. Anyways, so what we end up doing is sending an Excel injection. And if you don't know this or not, I did a recent release with Unicorn. And if you're not familiar with Unicorn, it's my favorite tool that I use on pretty much every single pen test that I've ever been in my entire life. So what Unicorn does is it uses PowerShell injection, right? So every machine that's Windows Vista or above has PowerShell loaded on it. And it uses a technique that Matthew Graeber came out with a number of years ago around being able to inject shellcode directly into memory through PowerShell injection. And so it loads a kernel 32 DLL base memory address. And then from there, it grows your stack with virtual alloc in order to allocate enough memory for the shellcode, and then it actually executes the shellcode directly under the PowerShell process. What's great about that is that it circumvents application whitelisting, antivirus, everything else you can possibly imagine out there. So it's a great method for infection. Now the great part about it is I released a Unicorn, I think, 2 years ago, which does what's called an x86 downgrade attack. So it works on 64-bit and 32-bit platforms. But what I recently released is the way to do macro injection. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I want a Windows interpreter shell. And I can just type whatever IP address I want to and specify macro. And it's going to go through and generate a macro that you can embed into Excel or Word or anything else that doesn't get picked up by anything. So when they open up the document, they enable macros. Again, if you have a trusted communication through OWA, that's very easy to do. Like, hey, can you open up this document? And it automatically goes and does it, exactly. So you can see here, there's your macro injection. This circumvents circumvents execution restriction policies. So if they have the most restrictive execution restriction policies, it gets around that. So it's pretty good. And also, in one of the most recent versions, I think it was a version ago, I added obfuscation into the payload itself. Because really, this is just code that's cast Unicode and then base 64 encoded. So I randomized the code variables then to change the pattern off of it, because most of the antivirus vendors are looking for basic signatures. So it gets around all of that every time you generate it, which is great.
Question?
Sure.
Did you get there with the decompiler?
Would I get where with the decompiler?
Did you get that last piece of code?
Oh no, the last piece of code that I generated here was just through. That didn't work. Hang on. Now this code that was generated in the text document is what's outputted from the Unicorn script, and what it does is it takes the PowerShell code and it casts the Unicode and base64 encodes it, and that command you basically copy and paste into a command line or through the Excel document, and then what happens is it passes the encoded command parameter through PowerShell, and then it base64 decodes it and executes it in memory. So you don't need to decompile or anything like that. It's all through native PowerShell.
Thank you.
Yep. So if I just did a quick like. I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm kind of been drinking too much. But anyways, if I just did a base64 decode, so if I did import bin ASCII, then bin ASCII, base64 decode, it would show all the information that's out there. It's just a straight PowerShell command. So what ended up happening here is we compromised around 7 different emails, and then we had that email trust train. I literally spent about probably 2 hours going through and trying to find who I was going to fish. And then it finally took some time, but I finally had some groups that I was able to target that had direct communications with the R&D people. So I started asking them questions about the R&D product and marketing material around it. And so what ended up happening is I ended up compromising around 7 different people within the R&D group and had access to their computers. Now, once I had access to their computers, what was great about this company is they actually did really good security practices. Like their R&D group had a completely segmented network that their R&D went on. So I couldn't even get to it from our corporate network, which is fantastic. Like, round of applause for that company because I think not anybody does that, right? Network segmentation is one of those principles that has gone out the window from like 1988 for some reason. But so we didn't have direct access to it. And so I had to figure out a way to get to this R&D network that was completely air-gapped and segmented. Couldn't figure out a way to hop over, tried looking for different areas, compromised their whole domain infrastructure. Everything was great. But we still had to get in through a lot of different areas. So what we did is I ended up compromising their badge system, which, if you don't know, most of the badge systems now are IP-based, and they're never segmented off the rest of the network, and they're stupid. Like, a lot of times they're like default passwords. But we got into their badge system, and I compromised the head of security's ID and email as well. And I sent an email to the front desk security guards saying, hey, just so you know, I had a new badge created. Can you come pick it up and then drop it off at the front desk for David Kennedy? He needs full access to this, and here's all the permissions, all this other good stuff. So had a badge created for me, which is great. And so I dressed up in business attire, and I added myself as an employee. And that's what I look like when I go through and do most of my red teams. It's just one of those weird things that you do. But I went to the front desk and got my badge, right? And so they printed one for me, and I had a badge, had my picture on it and all that good stuff. And I walk in with valid credentials into the site. So then, what's great is I get to this R&D room where I've been roaming around. By the way, this company specifically was like really easy to break into, but extremely difficult to get out of. Like they have like these man traps where you can't piggyback on other people, and you have to like hit a code or whatever. So like I'd get into this thing and I try to like piggyback, and it's like I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And there's a security guy looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, got my badge, I'm cool. So it was a little weird. Like getting out was the challenge. I ended up going out through a window. It sucks. Like getting in was the easiest part. Like you're just walking, like, hey, what's going on, guys? Good to see you. Anyways, so I find this R&D room, and it was a combination of a swipe and a pin. And so I'd already added myself to the permissions, got access to the pins, and then I used a clone card to get in. And I walk inside, and so it's the middle of the day, and I'm figuring, hey, it's an R&D place. There'll probably be a couple of guys, and I can make whatever excuse I want to walk in there. I walk in, and it's like a friggin' army in there. There's like 100 people having a really important meeting in there. So I open up the door, I'm like, and they're all looking at me, I'm like, whatever. And I just keep walking to the side like nothing ever happened. They kind of go about what they're doing. And so I get in there, and we're in this room with a lot of people, and I'm walking, and I'm like not paying attention, and I hit a trash can, a metal trash can, shoots garbage everywhere, and I fall over. And I'm on the ground like trying to get up and figure out what's going on. Thank God there was people there, so they picked me up like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm like, oh my God, I didn't see it there, I'm so sorry. Like, oh God, then I start walking like nothing ever happened. I'm so embarrassed, and I keep walking. So I get inside, and we ended up planting what we call a tap device. And I'm actually going to open source this tonight. And what this tap is we use Intel NUCs, which are like, you can buy them for like $200, but you can put anything you want to in them. Like LTE cards, wireless capabilities, everything you want to, solid state drives. And with these NUCs, there's some code that I wrote about 1.5 years ago that I've been improving for about 1.5 years, and I wrote this stuff called a TAP. It's called the attack platform. And what it does is it creates a reverse SSH connection to a remote instance on the box, and it heals itself. So in the event that there's something that happened that went wrong, it repairs itself, fixes it, keeps all of your tools up to date. But what's also great about it is that one of our guys, Jeff Walton, wrote a completely transparent SSH VPN. So we're going to release the code for that to where if you have a reverse SSH tunnel, you can go and actually VPN in through SSH to the environment itself, like you're sitting on those, like you're sitting a machine on those environments itself. So we're going to open source that code as well, so you can do a full SSH tunnel. If you've ever used SSH Shuttle, very buggy because you can't do things like port scans and things like that. This is actually like a native VPN into their environment. It's not like doing some weird funky stuff. It's legit. So we're going to open source all of that. And so I was able to plug in this TAP device. Plug it in, and then from there it uses LTE communications to communicate back to us. So the reverse SSH shell had access to their segmented network, and then from there compromise all their data, which was fun. So that was a fun one that we did. Embarrassing as hell when you trip over and you have like mustard all over your shirt and all this other stuff, and which is normal for me. But anyways, the second one we did. This is Larry here. It was a PCI pen test. So Larry, I'll have you do this one.
Yeah. So this is a PCI pen test I had.
Can't hear you, man.
Can you hear me?
Can you guys hear him?
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Can you talk like this? Talk like this.
Hello? Hello?
That's good.
So this is a PCI pen test I was on recently that I had some fun on. If you guys are experienced pen testers, this might be a little boring for you guys, but when I was an aspiring pen tester, these are the kind of stories I like to hear. But this was a small company that's one of the few companies in the U.S. that are actually allowed to create credit cards. And my goal was to see if I could get credit card information. All the users are on a Windows domain, no common vulnerabilities. We usually look for, say, null sessions, so we can enumerate all the users, try to brute force some credentials, look for weak SQL admin passwords, Tomcat, default cred, stuff like that. All that stuff was locked down. The PCI environment was behind 2 SSH jump boxes, so proper segmentation. Had to figure out how to get around that. All authentication with that, those jump boxes were with private, password-protected private keys. And as I said, all the PCI data was hosted on Linux, not on Windows. You know, we always go for domain admin. This is on Linux. How am I going to get into this Linux environment? And actually, all the data in the databases were encrypted. So this is kind of stuff I went through. I've kind of found out on the way. That's just a quick summary here. So I got the PCI ranges. They gave those to me. They said, hey, go after, here's my ranges, where all this secure data is. And basically, it was just 2 SSH services, OpenSSH 5.3. No common vulnerabilities that I know to exploit that. So how am I going to get into that environment? For me, when I see that, the first thing I think of is go for domain admin and attack the users that have access to those systems. How do you do it, Dave?
Same thing. Other than phishing.
So as I said, there was no easy ways to get in, no null sessions, no easy SQL passwords. So there's a really nice tool called Responder that the guys at Spider Labs wrote. It's pretty awesome. If you guys don't know, typical TCP resolution, when you try to go to a site, say try to map file server, when you try to resolve that file server, it's going to go to your local host file, see if it's there, try to resolve it at DNS, look at your local host, LM host file, go to your Win server. If all those fail, it's going to send out a broadcast for that server. And what this responder does is stand up and said, yeah, on that server, here's a challenge. Your system sends a response. We take that challenge and response and we crack it offline. And you see the top is us capturing the hash, and the bottom is us actually cracking it on Dave's super cracker that he built at work.
And by the way, you guys have been burning through that. So like, I got this liquid-cooled 4 R9 290Xs that are cracking about 90 billion per second. And like every week I go in there, there's a tank, a reserve tank that you need to put water into, right? Or not water, but the coolant stuff, or I don't know, whatever. Anyways, every week I come in, like the coolant's like all the way down to the bottom. Like they're burning through stuff so fast. Like I have like 16 different things I got to keep pouring in there. So anyways, you guys suck.
So anyway, we get one set of credentials for Active Directory, and a lot of people don't know, even Active Directory administrators might not know this, but one set of credentials gives you full read rights on Active Directory. So I can see all your users now, all your domain trusts, all your networks you have configured. So it gives me a really good foothold on the network and who to target. So who am I going to target? I'm going to enumerate the domain admins first. And one of these users sticks out pretty well for me because I'm looking for PCI data. And where's PCI data going to be stored? Probably in a database somewhere, right? So that senior DB admin, Justin, that looks like a good guy to go for. So there's a couple useful tools within Metasploit that I like. I try to do pretty much everything in Metasploit because it's an awesome framework. But there's one in there called PSExec logged in that you can just spray against. Once you get creds on a network, you can just spread them across the network and see where you have admin rights. So, and if you have admin rights, it'll tell you who's logged on to those systems. So that one cred that I got had admin access to one system. Once I got onto that system, open a Meterpreter shell, obviously, and run Mimikatz. If you guys don't know Mimikatz, it's been out about 3 years now, I think. A guy named Benjamin Delpy, hacker over in France, I believe. He started looking into programming in C, started running or just reading MSDN articles online, and figured out that there are clear text credentials saved in memory, and he figured out how to scrape them from memory. So this is one of the best tools hackers have given us here to get clear text credentials. Often we don't need clear text credentials, we just use pass the hash, but these are also very useful. Also, once we get a shell on a system, if you don't know, there's another module called Incognito, which allows us to steal security tokens. And what a security token is, when you log into Active Directory, you make a request to Active Directory, it takes all your group memberships, encrypts them, and gives them back to you, and all those memberships stay, or that security token stays in memory. If we have system access on your system, we can steal that token and use it to access other systems. So if you see here, everything's pretty much redacted here. But that top one was actually a domain admin. So the first machine that I popped administrative rights on had an actual domain admin. So all I did was add myself as a domain admin.
Which, if you're trying to evade detection, may not be a good idea because
Yes.
What's great with where we're at as a security industry is everybody has bought SIMs, right? We have SIMs that alert on things, and the only thing that our SIMs actually do is alert when someone's been added to the domain admins group, and that's it. So we have like millions of dollars investment for getting notified when we're domain admin. So most of the time we don't add that if we know that they're in place, but
right.
Hey, why not?
It's part of our methodology to actually test their detection and monitoring. So we'll usually create it just to see it if alerts created. But I mean, at this point, we've got clear text creds for a domain admin. We've got their security token. We don't really need to do that. So once I have domain admin rights, I can do my PSExec logged on against all the systems in the domain again. I can dump all your computers from Active Directory and just see where users are logged in. Again, I'm looking for Justin. That's that DB admin. I log on to his system and I see he's running Pagent. Anybody know what Pagent is? I don't even know if that's pronounced right. P-Agent. All right. So
Pagent too.
P-Agent is a utility that's downloaded with PuTTY. So when you use private key authentication with a Linux server, this will keep your private key in memory for you, so you only have to type your password in once, and then when you try to connect to other servers, you don't have to keep typing your password in all the time. But the cool thing is, once I'm system on that machine, if I migrate to a process owned by that user, I can steal that private key from memory and use that to connect to any PuTTY service. There's also scripts within Metasploit. There's if you do a run enum_PuTTY, it'll show you all the servers that they've PuTTY'd into, and it just enumerates the registry, looking for, because PuTTY keeps a history of servers that you've PuTTY'd into. So I migrate to that PuTTY, or that Pagent service, or actually I just verify that it's running. And if they ran the MSI installation for PuTTY, it also comes with some other tools. If they didn't have it, I would just upload Plink. But this Plink is like a command line utility for PuTTY. So if we run Plink-agent user at whatever host, it's going to pull that private key from memory and log me into the system. So that got me access to their jump box, one of their first jump boxes. So since I didn't want to keep pivoting through his box, I just took my public key, added it to his authorized keys, so I could just SSH in directly from my box there. Yeah.
Warren definitely stopped this.
So, yeah, this is me. This is me logging in as him from my box using my public-private key combination. So once I log into the system, start looking around for clear text passwords in his directory, seeing what else I have access to. Common thing, if you guys don't use Linux much, every command you type in Linux is saved in history. If you just type history, it'll show you all the commands you've ran. Saw a couple scripts being called from the temp directory. Catted one of them out, and it said, and that's been redacted too. Thanks, Dave. It was SSH to like DB01 or something like that. Perfect. I'm looking for a database server. So I do SSH pro, or the good redaction there, Dave. So I SSH into pro DB01. And I just run history again, and I see some clear text credentials there logging right into MySQL. So what I do, copy, paste, and I'm in SQL. And we have a nice little PCI search string here. This will work in MySQL or SQL with a little modification. But basically, this takes all, it says, show me all your table with columns that have Visa, card, Amex, CVV, CV2, all those different things. If they have any of those in their column name, show me where they are, and then I just have to go search for actual credit card numbers in them. So I just start searching for credit card numbers. I find an invoice table. I find a couple other tables. But basically, that was the end of the story there.
Good hack. That was a good hack. So that's thinking outside the box, right? And the point of these scenarios are really trying to figure out ways of being creative and doing things in a good manner. And it's about having fun with it, because everything that we do is about being creative, trying to find different ways into systems, hacking into in a different way. But ultimately, how do you figure out a way to defend against those types of attacks? And how do you get better at what we do? Because it's all about upping our game. It's all about us as attackers upping our game, but also corporations trying to protect the data that's really important to them. And so, there's a few projects that we've written because of the types of tests that we do that have been effective both on the offense and the defense. So I wanted to run through a few of those different tools. And one of the ones that isn't mentioned here that we're actually going to be releasing at DEF CON. We have a DEF CON talk, I think, on Saturday or Friday or something, talking about scaling new walls with old ladders. No, that was the name of the blog post. Name of our blog post. I can't remember the name of our DEF CON presentations. I don't remember. But it's really cool. We're releasing a new tool called Pivoter. And one of the biggest challenges you have as a pen tester is pivoting. And when I say that, if anybody here has been a pen tester, like doing pivoting inside of Metasploit sucks, right? Doing pivoting in Cobalt Strike sucks. Doing pivoting in Pro sucks, because you always need, administrative level rights. You need the ability to do all this other stuff, and most of the time it doesn't work. So what we've been working on, and kudos to Jeff Walton for actually doing it. It's funny because Jeff literally finished the code like a day before the DEF CON call for papers submission did. I'd already given up. I'm like, this ain't gonna work. Screw it. And then Jeff kept going through and he figured it out. But what we're doing is our requirements were to develop a way that if we were to compromise, let's just say a web service, like network service, let's just say we compromise an IIS box or a SQL box, and we're running as a network service account, which is a very limited user account, or we go after the end user, we do a phish, we compromise their system, and we're running as a very limited user account, right? So very low permissions in an infrastructure. What do? Now, as traditional assessors, what we would do is try to pillage a system, right? Try to find information that's on there that we can use to pivot to other systems and gain access to other systems, or try to escalate permissions, right? But most of the time, that's a very difficult process to do, especially when you're running as a very limited user account. So with Pivoter, what we're going to be releasing at DEF CON is a way to use, it's basically a full transparent VPN that works on Linux and Windows that allows you to basically VPN into an environment with limited permissions. So as an attacker box, I can have a call out on a machine that I compromise as a network service account. It calls back out to me and VPNs me into that box where I can use all my hacker tools, everything else, to pivot laterally into the rest of the network. So it completely changes the dynamics of how we move laterally into environments now and how we can actually attack systems, because we no longer have to worry about privilege escalation. We no longer have to worry about trying to find tidbits of information on an already compromised system. It basically puts us into that environment, and now we're essentially doing an internal pen test, right? So that'll be released at DEF CON. It's a 14 kilobyte executable that you can load directly into memory. So we have the ability to run VPN or run Pivoter in Metasploit, and it VPNs you into the environment for you. Or you could just use a PowerShell command that loads it directly into memory without having to worry about an executable PE file in the first place. So again, it gets rid of all that BS around PE stuff, right? So we'll be releasing that at DEF CON, which should be fun. But also, some of the other tools that we worked on, obviously the Social Engineer Toolkit has been my baby for a number of years. Ships, if you're not familiar, it's funny when we come up with terms for tools. Originally, we were going to call this chips because one of our guys at the office, Alex, ate 9 bags of chips in a Mexican sitting one time. So we're going to call it chips. We couldn't come up with a good acronym for chips, so we ended up calling it chips because it sounded kind of piratey. So like, hey, it's pirates, you know? So then it's the Shared Host Integrated Password Server. It sounded cool. But originally, Jeff had developed it with one of his companies that he worked with previously and worked with the team that actually built this portion. And then since then has been expanding and building on it, which has been awesome. And the new version that he's going to be releasing in the next couple of weeks, which I don't think you've even heard of yet.
I've heard rumors.
Have you heard rumors? What Ships does, just to put it in perspective, is when we attack a system, right? Let's just say we compromise an endpoint. Let's just say we escalate our permissions to administrator. There's information on that workstation or that laptop or that server that we're going after that can allow us to move laterally in the environment, whether that's local admin hashes, whether that's Kerberos tokens or whatever. It allows us to move very much, across the board, across the different systems to gain access. What Ships does is a small script that gets run on the endpoints through group policy. It also works on Linux now. It works on Cisco devices. It works on multiple other systems. And what it does is it randomly changes the passwords on, regardless if it's administrator or other accounts that you have, it randomly changes the passwords on all those systems based on different endpoint itself. So endpoint A and endpoint B, the passwords are completely different on both systems. And it manages all those centrally in a Ships web interface that you can use as administrator, does LDAP integration or Active Directory integration, where when you log in, you can just query a specific host, and it'll give you that password that you can then log in that system for administrative purposes. So it stops lateral movement on the network through a lot of the different techniques, and it's super easy to install, really easy to use. The new version of Ships actually also has a central password storage repository. So it's kind of like you can log into it, and you can have all of your passwords there, and the keys themselves for centralized password storage is actually held on your computer. It's never on the server itself. So there's a decryption routine that gets done through JavaScript on the site over SSL that decrypts your passwords real time based on the key that you have, but all the passwords themselves are actually stored on the server, encrypted all the time. There's never any unencrypted data, period, on the server, only on the workstation. So when I log in as Bob, I get only Bob's passwords that I can centrally store. I have my own key on my server that decrypts them and uses them. So you have the ability to centralize all passwords as well as randomly use all passwords on all of your domain controllers, servers, endpoints, everything else. And what's great is that anything that supports SSL, if you have a system that supports SSL, you can write a 2-second connector that connects to it and does the password rotation itself. It's very easy to go and write your own connectors for it. So it's an open framework around that, which has been awesome. So look out for that new version. I think he's almost done. I think it's like a week or 2 away.
I got some upgrades to do.
You have some upgrades to do?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You have some definitely new version. It's going to be awesome.
Give you my PowerShell scripts.
Sweet. Oh, with PowerShell injection. All right, PowerShell for the randomized passwords?
Just go PowerShell to administer and manage it all and look for errors and things like that. So
it's awesome.
I use it every day.
Heck yeah. Uses it every day. Big company, too. The pen testers framework. Anybody seen this yet? Yeah? A couple people. That's great. I've been talking, it's funny, I think I gave it at a Neo ISF meeting probably 2 years ago or something like that. I'm like, all right, it's close to being released. And then I just dropped it and I didn't release it until like 6 months ago, so I totally forgot about it. I do that every once in a while, like I code something really awesome, and then I forget about it and I don't complete it. I get like 98% there. And I'm like, all right, I'll finish it later, then I just forget about it and I start another project. But I ended up finally finishing this, and I actually just released version 0.5 yesterday. But the biggest thing for us as pen testers is keeping our tools and our techniques and everything else up to date. And we also develop a lot of our tools. Like we have our own internal GitHub with our own tools and things like that we develop internally to make things easier for us. And it's always making sure that we have the right versions of everything. And most of us use Kali Linux, which is absolutely awesome, best pen testing distribution out there, period. But a lot of times the things aren't always up to date, or the tools themselves aren't added to the repo, so it's very difficult for us to stay up to date with a lot of those different tools out there. So I ended up building a framework around pen testing and keeping our tools up to date, which is the pen testers framework. And it's super easy for you to learn. I can type my password in, right? And so you can get it from GitHub. So you just git clone github.com/trustedsec/ptf. And all you do to run it is just do ./ptf. I don't have an internet connection, so it's not going to work. Damn it. Didn't think about that. Let me turn off the internet checking in. I'm just going to turn it off. Hang on. It's cool when you run your own code. I've been drinking, so it's a little harder to do. Comments. There, so I got around it. It's cool when you write your own tools, so you can just code it on the fly, right? So the pen testers framework it's kind of Metasploit-esque, so the very similar type of syntax. So if you're familiar with Metasploit, you should be familiar with the pen testers framework. And all you do is you show modules. Modules are tools that either I have added or other people have contributed to. And there's been so many people contributing to modules because I made a programming language behind PTF to make a module. You don't have to know a lick of programming to create your own tool module. It's really easy to make. It takes 2 seconds to add your own tools, and then you get to submit your own module, and then you get the credit for it because you wrote your own module and you contributed to an open source platform. So it's really great. It's been huge support from the community. But what happens is that you have all these tools that we use on a regular basis: SQL Map, Ridinum, Beef, Nick2. I did a little typo there. But you have a lot of different tools, obviously Set. But you have all these tools that we use. And so what PTF does is it automatically goes through all the tools and automatically goes and installs them for you, and then it keeps all your tools up to date. And so what's nice about it is that if you just want to install one or two, you can, but you can also install all of them. So see this here when it says modules install all? If I just do run, and it's not going to work because I don't have internet access. Yeah, they're drinking too. Run modules and update all. It's going to go and automatically install all the tools for you. Go to the sites, do the configurations, configure all the dependencies for you, install them. Works on Debian and Ubuntu. I'm working on Red Hat right now. And it goes in and puts all of your packages in the /pentest directory. If you've been a pen testing for a while, one thing that you miss as a pen tester is the /pentest directory. Because everything moved to FSH compliance with Linux, and now you have to go to like user share and a bunch of other things. You don't know where the tools are at. You don't know what directories are in. So I use the penetration testing execution standard as a framework for keeping the directory structure. So things are like in intelligence gathering, DNS recon, exploitation, responder. So you have a pen test directory that you can go to that has all of your tools broken down in a very methodical way of looking at things. And then if I just want to update them again, I just go into PTF and I hit run modules, install, update all, and it goes through and updates all your tools for you. So you have the latest and greatest, you have everything that you want to at a real given time, and you have your own pen test distribution that you've created in a couple of seconds. Now, just to give you an example of the modules, let's just use Recon NG as one. So when you build a module, the things that you need is just author, so whoever wrote the module, the description of the tool, install type. As of version 0.5, I added SVNs, but it supports Git, SVN, and files, so like wgetting a file or something like that off of a site or Git or whatnot. Okay. Repository location, you give it the location that you want to actually pull the Git repository. The install location under Recon NG. And then what dependencies it has. So for Recon NG, it requires Python, and that's it. Now, what's interesting is I also wrote something called after commands. Let's just say that after you install a tool, it has commands you have to run. I can be like, okay, go to cd blah blah blah, and then type in shell install.sh, and then exit or whatever you want to do. It goes and it runs through after commands to do an install after you're done with it, so that you can properly install those tools after you're done. How long do you think that takes to write a module like that? A couple seconds, right? Really easy to go and do. So that's PTF. Where'd my button go? Here we go. Larry.
Yo. Token Hunter and Password Hunter are a couple tools I wrote pretty recently. I wrote a blog post on it not too long ago. It's on TrustedSec's blog if you guys want to look it up. But basically, usually when I'm trying to escalate to domain admin, it's not always as easy as the PCI compromise that I demonstrated. One of the things, once we get admin rights, say a workstation admin password or something that has rights to a lot of different systems, it's often quite tedious to try to open a shell on each system, load incognito, list all the tokens, look for that domain admin token so you can escalate rights. So someone in, actually I think it was Chris Campbell, I think it was around 2013, wrote a post on Pentest Geek where he demonstrated getting a shell through PowerShell, like Dave mentioned, with a unicorn. There's a command called invoke expression, or IEX for short. where you can basically tell it to download. You host your payload on a website. You use that invoke expression to download that and execute it all within memory, so you're not going to get popped by AV. He used this method. I think about a year later, Mubix wrote another post about using that with a Mimikatz post in PowerSploit. The guys at PowerSploit ported Mimikatz to a PowerShell script. So host that PowerShell script up on your host. Use that invoke expression to run it on a machine remotely. So I took all those ideas with Dave's unicorn to generate the code, the IEX expression, and basically put in just a quick VB script. And I have all the here's all the sites if you guys want to look up the background on where I got the idea. But basically, it's just going to throw out this command here, IEX new object download from my IP. We're going to download Mimikatz, and then you see a semicolon. The next command is going to be invoke Mimikatz, dump creds. This out file is a PowerShell command that allows you to write to a file easily. And what we do is going to write out to a file that's basically just an SMB share. So I open up a share that anybody can write to. It's going to write to the computer name, and it's going to output the Mimikatz output to that file on my share. So once I spray that out to all the systems, everything's going to come back to my share. All I have to do is grep those files for domain admin or whatever user I'm targeting. I also took this Python code recently and ported it to just a Metasploit resource script. So you don't even have to jump out of Metasploit. It'll generate all that code for you and insert it into psexec command. So all you have to do is hit run.
You're releasing that soon.
Yep, I'll be releasing that here soon.
And then one last thing I want to show, since we have like 3 minutes, I think 4 minutes. One thing I'll be open sourcing soon on the defensive side. Has anybody here used OSSec HIDs before? Anybody? OSSec, it's a host-based intrusion detection system. If you're familiar with OSSec, it sucks from the perspective of having to mass deploy it to get detection capabilities, because what you have to do is you actually have to generate a key on the server itself and then present that key to the agent itself for automatic registration. And so it's a total bitch to implement in a company, and most companies don't do it because of that key process. So what I did over one night and a whole bunch of beers is I wrote a new protocol for OSSec that automatically provisions and enrolls new agents from a system. So what happens is you deploy OSSec through, SCCM or whatever your package management processor is, and then you call this this executable, and it contacts your OSSec server, and it has a new service or new daemon listening that goes and provisions a new key, passes that key to the OSSec server itself, automatically registers it for you and provisions it, so that now you have an OSSec server that you can mass deploy to a company itself. So a really good way of open source. I'll be releasing that probably in the next few weeks. But it's really badass because it's, I'll show you real quick. I do everything with a security mindset, right? So the socket that gets created from the agent to the server is using an AES cipher key. So everything is passed over an AES socket. So it's all, encrypted. And what's cool about it is all that OSSec needs is the host name and the IP address, but sometimes you might have a virtual machine that's being NATed, so you still need the true IP address. So I grab the true IP address of that system when it connects to the server, grab the host name, issue the key, encrypt all that data, and then send it back. And it handles everything automatically on the server side itself, so it supports 32-bit and 64-bit, and it also supports Linux too. So it doesn't have to be just Windows. You can automate provision on Linux and Windows as well, so it automates all of that. And I don't use any, so it's funny, on older systems like Windows XP Service Pack 2 and things like that, I found that manage agents is broken to actually import the key. So I actually went through one night. I actually reversed the hash algorithm that OSSec uses to create the client keys, and I actually re-implemented that hashing algorithm in the client keys so that I can generate the whole client keys file itself without having to call manage agents. So it doesn't actually use anything OSSec that at all for the actual registration process. It just hooks into the libraries for it. And then it automatically provisions it for you, writes it out, and then starts the service for you, and then you're all of a sudden connected with OSSec. So if you want to do mass deployments now, it's now supported. Anybody have any questions? Sure.
With the
Nice shirt, nice shirt.
with the pivoter, how does that make it through if you have egress filtering enabled or anything like that on a network?
It's a good question. So the question was, how does it work in specific areas of egress filtering? Obviously, there's going to have to be some port that is allowed outbound. It does support native HTTP and HTTPS communication, so you can proxy it over RFC compliant HTTP and HTTPS traffic. So if they have the ability to communicate over HTTP or HTTPS, it's a good way out. But you still need an egress port for that connection to actually ride in to establish that VPN connection. So you definitely need an egress port for that. Good question. Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Bsides. It's good to see you. Good job, Laurie.